At least 10 people have been killed and more than 35 others injured after a truck drove into a crowd in New Orleans' French Quarter on Wednesday in the United States. The tragedy took place when a person said to be hell-bent on carnage drove this pickup truck at high speed. New Orleans Emergency Preparedness Agency earlier warned of the incident in the district known as the French Quarter and cautioned people to stay away from the area. According to reports, the suspect has been killed. The attacker shot at the police as well, who fired back. 2 officers were also wounded and were said to be in a stable condition. The police described the suspect's actions as a deliberate attempt to run over as many people as he possibly could. The FBI, which has taken over the probe, says New Orleans' ramming attack is not a terrorist attack, but it is being treated as an act of terror. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has called New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell to offer full federal support after this horrific tragedy. Biden has been briefed by the FBI and Homeland Security officials on what the White House called a horrific attack.
It did involve a man driving a pickup truck down Bourbon Street at a very fast pace, and it was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. This man, this perpetrator, he fired on our officers from his vehicle when he crashed his vehicle. 2 of our officers have been shot. They are stable.
You'll hear more after me. However, I have been in direct contact with the White House, with Governor Landry, and of course a unified command who is present here. What I'm asking at this time are prayers for those who have lost their lives in the city of New Orleans due to this tragedy. In addition to that, I'm asking the public to stay clear of 8 blocks around Bourbon Street. Stay clear from Bourbon Street, 8 blocks around. Very active, and again, a unified command is in place right now.
Let me now take you across live to DD India's Jessica Taneja, joining us from the newsroom. Jessica, what more can you tell us about this deliberate ramming of New Year revelers in New Orleans, which is also known as the birthplace of jazz music?
That's correct, and not a great day at all for those revelers. In fact, a great popular spot is now a grisly crime scene, something that no one imagined. But from the updates that we've received so far is the fact that now the Department of Homeland Security will also be assisting the FBI and the local enforcement authorities in terms of investigating the intent of the attacker when it comes to this low-tech vehicle ramming incident. And perhaps in some time there will be more clarity. And as you pointed out earlier, the White House has taken note of it. So has President Joe Biden, who's keeping a close watch. It's been a tragic moment for the people of New Orleans, especially for the French Quarter, where Bourbon Street is where most of the revelers would come, not just for the brilliant jazz music that it hosts, but also for various other activities. There were 2 open-air concerts also taking place, and many games as well that were planned there in the initial time, as we are being told, but those seem to have not been affected by this incident, although you heard from the superintendent of police of New Orleans there, and Kirkpatrick, who did say that there was, this was meant to create a carnage-like situation. And if you look at the security that was deployed earlier, reports also seem to suggest that those streets were closed for vehicular traffic because in the evening it opens up for the pedestrians. So there seems to be no clarity, so to say, as to why that street would eventually see the attacker in a pickup truck, no less, ram into people and into a crowd full of people who were there to just celebrate their New Year's Eve and perhaps return from the night on a much happier note, which doesn't seem to be the case now.
Yes, the city is set to host a college game later in the day called the Sugar Bowl. Now, what is the FBI saying, Jessica, about the attack and the attacker? And now that it is classified it as an act of terrorism, but there was some debate about it earlier as well, wasn't it?
Well, there certainly was between the mayor of New Orleans and the superintendent of police of New Orleans and Kirkpatrick, because when we heard from the mayor, she seemed to have suggested that it was a terrorist attack, but then only later in the press conference from the superintendent of police and Kirkpatrick that we heard that it was not an incident of terrorism that was still under investigation, but very recently, about a few minutes ago, there was an update where FBI now is calling in an act of terror. That confusion set in motion because of the definition that the FBI sort of refers to when it comes to a terrorist act. But if you look at the identity of the attacker, which hasn't been told by any of the enforcement authorities there, no reports have come in on that, wherein the question right now rests on the intent of the attacker. That is what is being investigated at this point, to understand the intent, because even if it is an act of terror, now that the FBI is investigating it through that lens, it would have to come with an intent, and certainly one will wait for what that is. But what we do know so far is that from the police authorities that we've heard, that the attacker deliberately planned it because the city, as the security situation on the ground was, had barricades in place and bollards in place, but some initial reports seem to suggest that those bollards were old and were replaced by stainless steel ones, and the city had gone through an infrastructure overhaul. But that certainly wasn't enough to save those 10 people who lost their lives on an otherwise really pleasant evening.
Yes, certainly a high-speed, heavy vehicle being driven through pedestrians, literally very, very tragic incident indeed. But tell us about the curious case of an improvised explosive device also being found on the scene, and I believe now a long gun has also been found.
That's correct. The long gun perhaps is being referred to, if I'm not wrong, to the assault rifle that was found with the attacker. And as the event unfolded, the attacker not only ran the crowd with this pickup truck, but also then fired at the police authorities, who then, of course, prevented his attack from going further and had neutralized him there and then. And 2 police officials were also injured in that particular moment. So that's what exactly we know so far. But when it comes to the security situation, and when you talk about the particular intent, that is yet to be established. But from how these moments have unfolded, it certainly rests on the investigation and the investigative authorities to determine as to what the intent really was and how this could have been prevented. Initially, there were reports suggesting that improvised explosive devices or IEDs were found near the spot, but that was later clarified by the supervisors in the case from the federal authorities, suggesting that they may not be connected because the attacker was carrying an assault rifle.
Yes, and we've seen this mode of attack being carried out in different parts of the world, and it's been some time that such attacks have been carried out as well. So perhaps the protocols that are put in place for security in times of when people gather in streets for celebrations or other purposes, they perhaps need to be looked at very carefully as well and revised if that is possible. Thanks a lot for the moment, Jessica Tareja.